Picture a guy named Josh, 26, hitting snooze for the fourth time before he even opens his eyes. Same room, same ceiling, same broken promise he made to himself the night before. He's told himself 100 mornings in a row that tomorrow looks different. Tomorrow never shows up. Josh actually meant it this time. Lying in bed at midnight, he swore off the scrolling, swore he'd hit the gym before work, swore this was the version of him that finally sticks. Then 8 in the morning hits. His thumb finds the phone before his brain even clocks in, and 40 minutes vanish into a feed he can't even remember scrolling through. Here's what nobody tells him. Josh already knows exactly what's wrong. He could write the diagnosis himself. Too much scrolling, not enough movement, no structure to his day. He's read the articles, watched the videos, nodded along to every piece of advice out there, and not one single fact he's absorbed has changed a single thing he actually does. That's because your brain doesn't run on facts, it runs on repetition. Information tells you what to do once. Repetition is what actually rewires the circuit so the new behavior becomes the default. You could read 1,000 books on discipline and still lose to a habit you've repeated 10,000 times. Reps beat knowledge every single time. Think about it like a trail cut through thick woods. The first time you walk it, it's slow, it's awkward, branches everywhere. Walk that same path enough times and it wears into a groove so deep your feet find it without thinking. Every action you take today is a footstep on that trail. Every single day is a vote for which version of you gets to keep walking it. So instead of white-knuckling your way through willpower every morning, let's talk about how you actually cut a new trail without exhausting yourself in the process. These aren't motivational posters, fellas. They're mechanisms, 5 of them, and they get bigger and more useful as we go. By the end, you'll understand why change felt impossible before and why it won't anymore. Number 1 on the list is habit stacking, and it starts with a simple question. Would you rather plant a tree in dry, untouched dirt or right next to a root system that's already thriving? Habit stacking means you take something you already do without thinking and you plant your new habit directly beside it, letting the old routine's momentum drag the new one along for free. Dry ground takes forever. You have to dig, water, hope the soil even holds. That's what it feels like trying to build a habit completely from scratch, relying on memory and motivation alone at 6 in the morning. But plant next to a routine that already has roots, one you've repeated thousands of times without fail, and the new habit gets fed by the old one's momentum instead of starving on its own. So look at the handful of things you already do on autopilot every single day. Brushing your teeth, making coffee, locking the front door on your way out. These are rock solid, thriving roots, repeated without fail for years. Attach something small and new directly onto one of them, and you're not asking your brain to remember a new routine. You're just extending one it already runs automatically. Here's a concrete one. I'm going to assume you brush your teeth most nights, so while you're already standing there, add 30 seconds of mouthwash right after. You weren't going to skip brushing anyway, so the new habit rides along for free. No extra time carved out of your day, no new alarm, no new decision. Just 30 seconds stapled onto something you were already doing. Or take your coffee. While it's brewing, you're usually just standing there scrolling or staring at the wall waiting. Use those 90 seconds to stretch your hamstrings, roll your shoulders, touch your toes. You're not adding a task to your day, you're filling dead time that was already happening anyway. That's the entire trick behind stacking. Piggyback on something that already runs like clockwork. It's basically sneaking into a concert wearing someone else's wristband. Security's already checked that pass, already waved it through the gate 1,000 times. You walk in right behind it without anyone questioning a thing. That's what habit stacking does for your new behavior. It borrows the credibility of a routine your brain has already approved and stops asking questions about. But here's the problem. Your brain is wired to resist anything that feels big, new, or effortful, and it will fight you on purpose to conserve energy. Stacking helps you sneak past that guard once. What happens when the new habit needs to grow past 30 seconds of mouthwash? There's a second trick for getting around that resistance entirely, and it might be the smallest idea in this whole video. Number 2 is starting stupid small, and I mean smaller than your pride wants to allow. Most guys set a goal, fail to hit it for 3 days straight, and quit completely. The fix isn't more motivation, it's shrinking the target until failure becomes almost mathematically impossible. You're not lowering your standards, you're just making the door small enough that you'll actually walk through it. Say flossing every night feels impossible to keep up with. You've tried and quit a dozen times. So don't commit to flossing every tooth. Commit to flossing one single tooth. That's it. It sounds almost insulting how small that is, but it removes every excuse you've ever used, because nobody on earth is too busy or too tired to floss one single tooth before bed. Same exact logic applies to working out. If the idea of a full session feels like too much some nights, the requirement isn't a full session, it's 2 push-ups. 2, down and up, twice, and you've technically kept your promise to yourself. A proper workout is obviously better when you can manage it, but 2 push-ups completed will always beat a full session you talked yourself out of. Want to read more but keep putting it off for weeks at a time? Don't commit to a chapter. Open the book and read a couple of words. That's the whole requirement. Most nights you'll naturally keep going once the book's actually open in your hands, But even on the nights you don't, you still showed up, and showing up is the entire game here. If prayer or quiet reflection is the habit you keep abandoning, 30 seconds counts. Not a full session, not perfect focus, just 30 seconds of showing up on purpose. It feels almost too small to matter, and that's exactly the point, because the size of the habit was never the part that was breaking you. It was always the size of the commitment standing in front of it. None of this is about finishing the marathon. It's about putting your shoes on. That's the entire goal on the days your motivation is sitting at 0. Once the shoes are actually on your feet, walking out the door stops being a decision and starts being the obvious next step, because you've already crossed the hardest, most resisted part of the whole process. Starting is the hardest rep there is, harder than the workout itself, harder than the chapter, harder than the flossing. Once you're moving, your brain actually wants to keep going, because stopping mid-stride feels more uncomfortable than continuing does. That's the trail deepening in real time, one step compounding into the next until walking it feels less like effort and more like gravity. Number 3, and this one changes everything if you actually do it. Track your progress somewhere you can physically see it. Your brain doesn't reward invisible effort nearly as well as it rewards visible proof. You could complete a habit perfectly for 2 straight weeks, but if there's no record of it anywhere, some part of you will still feel like none of it happened. You felt this already. Think about how satisfying it is crossing one single item off a to-do list, even something small like buying milk. That tiny hit of satisfaction is dopamine firing because your brain just registered proof of progress. It's not really about the milk. It's about watching evidence stack up that you're a person who follows through on what he says he'll do. So put a calendar on your wall, a physical one, somewhere you'll actually see it every day. Every single time you complete your habit, mark it with one big red X. Don't overthink the system beyond that. The X isn't decoration, it's a receipt, proof written down in ink that on this particular day, you were the guy who showed up instead of the guy who didn't. Here's where it gets almost involuntary. After 4 or 5 days of red X's in a row, something shifts. You stop wanting to break the chain you've built. On the nights you're exhausted and tempted to skip it, you'll do the bare minimum version just to protect that streak on the wall, because losing it suddenly feels like a real physical loss. That red X was never really about the habit itself. It's a receipt proving something bigger, that you're becoming the kind of guy who shows up even when he doesn't feel like it. Miss enough days and the receipts stop, and so does the proof. Keep them coming, and eventually you don't need the calendar anymore because the identity's already been built. If you want a place to actually build these habits alongside other guys doing the same work, I run a Discord server full of people leveling up right now, tracking their own red X's, holding each other accountable when motivation runs dry. It's free to join, and honestly, some of the best accountability I've seen comes from strangers online who refuse to let each other quit quietly. I also opened up YouTube memberships recently for anyone who wants to go a little deeper. Members get early access to uploads before anyone else sees them, unreleased content I don't post publicly anywhere, and a look at what I'm actually working on behind the scenes. No pressure whatsoever if that's not your thing, but if you're in, I'd genuinely love to have you there. If any of this is landing differently than the usual self-help fluff you've scrolled past 100 times, subscribe. Not because I need the number, but because this is exactly the kind of talk I put out regularly, and if you're serious about becoming the guy who actually finishes what he starts, this is a good place to keep showing up. But here's the part that trips up guys who've done everything right so far. Even a perfect calendar full of red X's can collapse completely inside the wrong environment. You can stack habits, start small, and track everything religiously, and still lose the whole thing in a week if the room you live in is actively working against you every single day. Number 4 is fixing your environment before you ever trust your own willpower again. This one's bigger than the last 3 combined, because it doesn't matter how disciplined you are on a good day. A bad environment beats a good mindset nearly every single time, and most guys never even realize it's the room, not them, quietly sabotaging the whole plan. Studies on self-control consistently show willpower behaves like a battery, not a personality trait. It starts the day full and drains with every single decision, every temptation resisted, every ounce of friction you push through. By 8 at night, that battery is running on fumes, which is exactly why the habit you swore you'd do after work is the one that dies first. So stop relying on willpower to fight the same battle every single night. Put your phone in another room entirely while you work, while you read, while you try to fall asleep at a decent hour. You're not trying to resist the temptation anymore. You're removing it from the room completely. And a temptation that isn't there costs you exactly 0 battery to ignore. Take it one step further and delete the addicting apps off your home screen completely, not just move to a folder on page 3. Every extra tap between you and mindless scrolling is friction working in your favor. 3 seconds of friction sounds small, but 3 seconds is often the entire gap between 40 minutes lost and 40 minutes you actually gotta keep for yourself. Same principle applies anywhere you're trying to build momentum. Leave your textbook open to the exact page you need the night before, sitting right on your desk where you can't miss it. That's one less decision your drained battery has to make in the morning. One less excuse available when you're tired and looking for any reason to skip it entirely. Lay your gym clothes out the night before too, folded and ready by the door or on the chair you'll see first. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but every piece of friction you remove ahead of time is one less reason your tired brain at 6 in the morning can invent to talk you out of showing up like you promised yourself you would. You are the architect of your own space, whether you've been treating it that way or not. Every object, every app, every open tab is either pulling you toward the guy you're trying to become or quietly dragging you back toward the guy you're trying to leave behind. Build a room on purpose, because right now it's building you whether you notice it or not. Here's the reframe most guys never make. You think discipline is the problem, that you're just weaker than the guys who have it figured out? You're wrong. Discipline was never the real issue. The real issue is a system that forces you to rely on willpower in the first place, and once your environment stops fighting you, you'll barely need discipline at all. Number 5, and this one might be the most powerful mechanism on this entire list, implementation intentions. It's a real term psychologists use for something incredibly simple. A pre-decided if-then rule that runs automatically the second a specific trigger shows up. So you're never standing there in the moment trying to talk yourself into the right decision from scratch. It sounds a little robotic when you first hear it, and honestly, it kind of is. If X happens, then I do Y. That's the entire formula, no exceptions, no wiggle room, no negotiating with yourself in the moment. And that rigidity is exactly the point. Because a decision you already made yesterday is a decision your tired brain doesn't have to make again today. This isn't just a nice idea either. Studies on implementation intentions have found people using simple if-then rules become up to 300% more likely to actually follow through compared to people relying on general intentions alone. That's not a small edge. That's the difference between a habit that survives a bad week and one that quietly dies by Wednesday. Here's what it actually sounds like in practice. If I feel stressed, then I walk outside for 5 minutes instead of reaching for my phone. You're not deciding that in the stressful moment when your judgment is at its worst. You already decided it in advance, calmly with a clear head, and now your brain just has to execute a rule instead of fight a craving. Or if you feel tempted to slide back into an old habit you're trying to break, then you text a friend immediately, no thinking required. It's not about being perfect in that moment. It's about building a 1-second pause between the urge and the action, and inside that single second is where almost all of your real change actually happens. That 1-second pause between the trigger and your reaction, that's where the entire fight actually lives. Your phone buzzes, your hand moves before your brain even checks in, stress hits, and you're already reaching for the fridge. But wire in one of those if-then rules, and something shifts. You buy yourself a single second, and in that second, for the first time, you're choosing instead of reacting. Here's the part 1 almost cut, because it sounds too small to matter, but this next one actually changes everything, and I mean that literally, not as a hook. It's the cheapest habit on this entire list, costs $0, takes under a minute, and most guys never do it once in their whole life. This is the one people message me about years later. Number 6 is reflecting every single night before you fall asleep. Not journaling for 20 minutes, not some elaborate ritual with candles. A 60-second gut check before your head hits the pillow. Most guys go from scrolling straight into unconsciousness, and their brain never processes a single thing that happened that day. No lesson gets filed away. Tomorrow becomes a blurry rerun of today, and you wonder why nothing's changing. Here's exactly what you ask yourself. What did I do well today? What got in the way of the person I'm trying to become? And what's one thing I'll change tomorrow? 3 questions, maybe 45 seconds total. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but a guy who reflects for 6 months straight is running laps around the guy who's been white-knuckling willpower with zero feedback loop. You don't need a journal for this one. You don't need an app, a habit tracker, or a $5 notebook from the store. Whisper the answers to yourself, lying there in the dark, right before you fall asleep. It feels almost too casual to work, but your brain doesn't care if you wrote it down. It cares that you named it out loud, even quietly, even half asleep. And this isn't some productivity hack invented by a guy with a podcast. This nightly habit mirrors a tradition that's centuries old. In Islam, there's an actual practice of reviewing your day before sleep, self-correcting, and asking to grow from it. Different name, same mechanism. Long before anyone talked about neuroplasticity, people already understood that the day needs closing out on purpose, or it repeats itself. Reflection does something specific. It turns a mistake into a lesson instead of a bruise you carry around for weeks. Skip it, and one bad afternoon quietly turns into a bad week, then a bad month, because nothing ever got named or examined. A guy who reflects nightly catches the slide on day 2. A guy who doesn't catches it on day 30. If he catches it at all, that gap is the whole difference. Number 7, and this one's as cheap as the last one on this list. Set one daily intention before you touch your phone in the morning. Not a 5-page plan, not a vision board. One sentence said to yourself before your thumb even finds the lock screen. It takes maybe 10 seconds to say. Most guys skip it entirely and hand the first hour of their day to whatever app opens first. Think about your actual morning. Eyes open, phone's already in your hand within 90 seconds. You check one notification, then somehow 40 minutes disappear into content you didn't choose and won't remember. Nobody decided that. The phone decided it for you, by default, because you never beat it to the punch. That's 40 minutes of your one life, every single morning, spent reacting instead of choosing. So here's the override. Before the phone, before anything, take 60 seconds and say one line out loud. Today I'll move my body. Today I'll protect my peace. Today I'll choose the harder, better option. That's it. You're not scheduling your whole day, you're aiming it. And a day that starts aimed behaves completely differently than a day that starts reactive, even if the tasks look identical on paper. You think this is about becoming perfect. It's not. And chasing that is actually what burns most guys out by their late 20s. You're not building a flawless routine you'll maintain forever without a single slip. You're pointing your brain in a direction. One rep, one vote, one 60-second sentence at a time. Sometimes that's genuinely all a day needs. A direction, not a destination you have to hit today. Here's the reframe that actually matters more than any single habit on this list. Most guys keep trying to white-knuckle their way through willpower until they burn out completely, usually around the same excuse, same relapse, same 3 a.m. promise to start over Monday. But the guys who actually change aren't more disciplined than you. They stopped fighting themselves and started redesigning the game. Shift the design, not the discipline, and the results follow. I know how that sounds coming from someone still figuring it out in real time. I disappeared from this channel for 4 years. No videos, no explanation, only quiet work nobody was watching. And when I came back, I'd somehow crossed 10,000 subscribers without chasing a single one of them. Slow progress still counts, even when nobody's clapping for it. Especially then. Go plant the tree today, not tomorrow.